Let's turn to the U.S. economy. I want you to take a listen to what President Trump told NBC. He was asked if he would be comfortable with the country potentially dipping into a recession in the short term if he were able to achieve his long-term goals. Here's his response.
Some people on Wall Street say that we're going to have the greatest economy in history.
Is it okay in the short term to have a recession?
This. Look, everything's okay.
Everything's okay. That's the president saying everything's okay, including a short-term recession. Do you agree?
Well, I'm old enough to remember when Ronald Reagan took office and inflation was completely out of control. He and Paul Volcker had to take some pretty bold and swift actions to tame inflation. That included a pretty severe recession, but that's what it took. When you come into office and you are inheriting enormous messes across the spectrum, an open border that presents a clear and present danger, a 40-year high inflation that has dramatically devalued the dollar, endless wars going on. It's hard to clean up those enormous messes. So I appreciate President Trump has acted boldly, swiftly, decisively to clean up some of these messes. And yeah, it's not going to be easy. And sometimes the results are going to have to be reevaluated and relooked at, some actions reversed, but you have to act boldly when you have that responsibility.
I hear you when it comes to the border. I hear you when it comes to inflation. I hear you when it comes to massive debt. But this is President Trump trying to reshape the American economy, bring more manufacturing jobs here through a very aggressive menu of tariffs all over the world, which will, of course, raise prices, according to almost every major economist. And it does seem like there's been a reluctance on the part of the president to he acknowledges disruption, but to acknowledge how much this could hurt lower income people. I want to play something else President Trump said about concerns over the impact that the tariffs are having on prices.
Somebody said, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, and maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally.
So the fact is we have allowed manufacturing of very strategic, very important products to be offshored. President Trump fully understands that. He fully understands one of the reasons he won the presidency is because of Joe Biden's high inflation, so he's fully aware of that. Again, I have my concerns. The markets have shown those concerns. They've bounced back. For my part, what I've been trying to do, keep the administration apprised of the businesses that are going to suffer if this continues long term. But it does sound like his bold strategy is resulting in other nations coming to the table, negotiating in better faith than they have in the past. I don't know where this all goes. I don't want to lessen President Trump's leverage by undermining him whatsoever. I just keep him and his administration apprised of how it impacts the Wisconsin businesses. I think that's currently my role. And again, actually cheerlead, hope for the best here, as opposed to, I think a lot of people are hoping he fails. I hope he succeeds.
I hope he succeeds too. How concerned are you about the next 4 to 6 weeks with the final Chinese container ships pre-tariff reaching American shores, with warnings of empty shelves, with warnings of higher prices? What industries in Wisconsin are you worried about most right now?
Primarily those that are involved in manufacturing, where they also export, they'll import component parts. They're competing against foreign companies that won't be subject to those type of tariffs. So again, it all depends on how high those tariffs are. And 10% above the board tariff, I mean, that's on the wholesale cost of goods. That probably will not have that significant impact on inflation. Nobody can predict all of these things. But again, my role is listening to my constituents, relaying that to the administration. I will say the administration, the trade representatives are very accessible. They are listening to this. They understand the concerns. I think President Trump understands concerns. But this is a multi-decade, firmly held belief on the part of President Trump that America has put itself in peril by allowing so many strategic products to be offshored. He's trying to turn that situation around. It's not easy. This is a problem that's built over decades. He's trying to do it within one administration. That's why he's acting boldly and swiftly.
Yeah, I don't think dolls are in the American strategic interest, though, right? I mean, you're talking about semiconductors and the like, and I understand your point. And that's why even many conservatives say that there should be more, like Stephen Moore, for example, there should be more discrete targeting of industries and not just a wide swath of anything coming from any other country?
Well, again, President Trump has a negotiating strategy, a negotiating style. I think he's throwing the entire world out of balance. I think he understands that creates uncertainty and instability, which is not good for economic activity. He understands those things, but that's his negotiating strategy. And it sounds like nations are coming to the table, starting to negotiate in good faith, which they have not been willing to do in the past. I've done a lot of negotiating. Sometimes you've got to be hard. Take a hard position with your negotiating partners. Sounds like that's the approach he's taking. Again, I, for one, am wishing him success.